if we don't have hope that the future will be better, for our families, offspring, everything, why even do this? Why mine Bitcoin? Why read old books on my show? Why, tell people to build social capital and come together, and that multiculturalism is an abject failure, and to reject it? There's no way I would be doing this if I thought that we couldn't see change, positive change in my lifetime.
This rip of TFTC was brought to you by River. It's the best place to buy Bitcoin. Go to river.com/TFTC and enjoy this episode.
We're live, joined by Peter Quinones. As is always the case, typically when you have an interesting guest, you start recording a podcast before you actually hit record. And we're just talking about the competency crisis and how little knowledge is being passed on. And Peter was explaining my experience in the Bitcoin mining world. That experience started in the oil and gas field. I helped start a company called Great American Mining, and we helped oil and gas operators mitigate their flare gas by mining Bitcoin. So you bring on generators, data centers, the machines, take the gas, create electricity, produce Bitcoin. But that experience led me to become particularly close with a lot of people in the oil and gas industry. And that's one thing that they highlighted is due to all the subsidies for wind and solar and the disincentivization to go get a petrochemical engineering degree, the amount of knowledge that is not being passed down within the oil and gas sector alone is nauseating. We are within a generation of losing a lot of critical knowledge that allowed us to get to this point in human history.
Oh, is it even that? We're not progressing. I mean, listen to a lot of tech guys, and they say that in order for what is coming with AI, and as fast as AI is growing, really the only way we're going to be able to power it is through nuclear. I mean, we're just going to have to go completely nuclear. And there are cleaner ways of doing it. I've heard of what's it called, salt thorium, or
thorium salt reactors. Yeah.
Salt reactors. I've heard this for 6-7 years now, and it's just something that has to be done. And this goes to politics. The regime in charge, this regime that we've been living under since the 1930s, just doesn't want that. They're too entrenched in the old system and the old oligarchs who have control over oil and the whole thing with Venezuela now. It's like, I mean, the Koch brother, the remaining Koch brother has to be licking his chops because they own the only, as far as I understand, one of the only reactors that can refine Venezuelan oil on the planet. So we have this old way of doing things, and they're just not willing to let go. And all of this stuff could be taken care of if we just went fully nuclear. And it's where basically we need a revolution of the tech sector, which is what I've been calling for, and what I started noticing probably in February was that these tech guys it seemed like they were making a play for the White House, and they were making a play for power in the White House, and they were going to do it through Trump. And honestly, if we don't get to there, things are just going to be falling apart. You're going to see, if we do not have a giant leap forward in technology and allow these people to work, you're looking at like the Soviet Union in the 70s and 80s, 1970s and 1980s, of things just falling apart to the point where private companies are stepping in and just doing the job that the government was supposed to be doing. And that's where we're at, actually.
Yeah, it's glaringly obvious. I think part of the reason, I'm not sure if you're well versed on the show and the background myself personally, as you can tell, Bitcoin mining. I've been into Bitcoin for about 11 years, and that's how I backed into this, was noticing the oligarchs and their control over the monetary system, particularly post 2008. And actually, it wasn't their control of the monetary system, it was their lack of control over it, and the papering over of systemic risks that exist, and the fact that many people don't understand, but the global financial system is extremely fragile, and Bitcoin being a private market solution to that problem is something that, luckily for me, I latched onto in my early 20s and have stuck to for the last 11 years. But that's part of the reason I reached out to you too and had Tom introduce us, because I listened to your episode with him and have been listening to some of your shows, as well as Bitcoiners have been picking up on the signal that you've been sending out there. And I particularly liked your conversation with Tom, because in the lead up to this election, as you mentioned, this tech elite sort of positioning themselves to help fix the country by using Trump as a conduit. I think it's really important for people to understand the context as you explain it, particularly elite theory and what the framework that we're currently operating within and the stakes of this particular presidential election. So I think we dove into it a little bit, but I think taking a step back and from your perspective, understanding how you are viewing this landscape right now as it pertains to elite theory, like who are the players, what's at stake, and where you think we should go.
Well, it's always going to be a small group that's in charge. It's always going to be a group that is put it this way. It's easier for a group of 2,000 to, and that's even too big in my opinion. I like to stay around Dunbar 150, anywhere between 100 and 200. 150 people can organize better than 350 million. So once you realize that 350 million people can't organize, and that it's always going to be a small group that's in charge, you realize that populism, democracy, republicanism, this is just basically getting in the way of what you want. And what you want is you want competent people to make the decisions, and the less the better. One, I mean, look at Tesla, look at Starlink, look at Elon Musk's, what he's built. I mean, he's the final, he makes the final decision. Has everything worked for him? No, everything's not always going to work. So people who attack him for any failings he's had or other things, they're not taking into consideration that they've had failings in life. It's easier to attack somebody who has more than you because there's a inherent jealousy, and also complain about the way he may have made a lot of that money, which I don't have a problem with. There's always going to be a small group in charge. And I would say that, and this gets way off track, before the New Deal regime started in the 1930s, and especially before World War I, you had a small group and they knew what they were doing, and they were pretty good at governance. And then FDR came along. He took all the power of a king, and I think he did 3 or 4 times as many executive orders as any other president. And a lot of people can say, well, he was in there for 4 terms. Well, no, he did that in like 6 years. But after when FDR died, he didn't leave that power to anybody. So that power got dispersed down into the state, into what has come to be known as the managerial state. James Burnham's famous book, The Managerial Revolution, a book that someone like Mark Andreessen has been talking about a lot recently, where now you have managers in charge. And managers are not, the only thing the managers are doing is making sure that they can perpetuate the system, that the system keeps going, that the managers stay in charge. They're not experts. And as time has gone on, you've seen the expert class fall away from the government. So 50 years ago, Elon Musk would be working with the government directly or working for the government. There was a time when the smartest people in the world or in our country were pulled into the government to work and to solve problems, to make sure we had momentum going into the future. And that has fallen away. And one thing that I noticed, if you look back, and I can never pronounce the name of the Coinbase guy. Was it Balaji?
Balaji.
Yeah, Balaji. Yeah, he talked about recently on the Moment of Zen podcast. He said in 1991, you had, when the internet's coming online, you had all of these guys who come to be known as tech giants. You know, they had a choice. Were they going to work privately, or were they going to help the government? Because at that time, you also have the Soviet Union just fell apart. And it looks like the United States, you know, Pat Buchanan was saying this is our time to become the shining city on a hill. Let's forget the wars, put all that aside. The Cold War is over. We've defeated the Soviet Union. Let's become the greatest civilization. And you saw that, no, we're going to go into Iraq and we're going to start a war on Islam. And these tech guys decided to go into it for themselves. And a lot of them went into business with the government. Now, when I was a libertarian, I would have, that, you know, upset me. They're all welfare whores and everything. Peter Thiel and Palantir, welfare whores. Elon Musk, no. When you realize that this government can't do its job anymore, why not take everything you can get from them and start building systems outside of it? You know, Samuel Konkin, you know, had this agorist theory where you need to start building the systems parallel to the government. So when the government falls, well, that's impossible, especially when it comes to heavy industry. You're not going to be able to do that outside the system. But if you do it in the system and you use the system and you actually can fleece the system, make yourself wealthy, well, there's going to come a time when things get really bad, and then you can make your move. And you may need to gather intel on the people in charge. So I don't know, maybe this thing Palantir could be used for that. Or you need to make sure that your narrative, the narrative you want to put out there, you control. And you say, okay, let's buy Twitter. It seems like that's where narratives go to be born, and that's where narratives fester. That's where they die too. So now you have control of the thing that creates political narratives, that creates social narratives, that creates all narratives. You know, 7-8 years ago, we used to say Twitter isn't the real world, when people used to get too bogged down on Twitter. Twitter absolutely is the real world now. And this is what my friend Matt Erickson started seeing back in January. He introduced me to it. We started talking about it in February. And we're like, it just seems like these people are positioning themselves around Trump. And Trump's under attack. He's got all these, they're going to bankrupt him. They're going to put him in jail. And, we just theorized, well, what if a bunch of really wealthy people came to Trump and said, well, make sure that you retain your wealth, DJT, and we make, we keep you out of jail. I don't know how they were able to pull this off, but just watching all these things get dismissed one after another, you just throw your hands up. I mean, that could just be basically Trump, his Supreme Court appointees, which weren't all great. And we said, well, the biggest signal that this is going to happen is that also there was the fact that Vivek was traveling with him, and Vivek would come out and say something like, we need to deregulate cryptocurrency, and we need to never have a central bank digital currency. And then Trump, like 2 days later, would come out on stage and say, we need to deregulate cryptocurrency and not have, I promise we'll never have a, it's like, well, that's not Trump. Trump doesn't think that way. Trump doesn't know what cryptocurrency is. Trump doesn't know what central bank digital currency is. He's being told what to say. And who's telling him what to say? Well, the guy who's traveling with him and is basically his opening act. So when we saw that and we knew Vivek's ties to Silicon Valley and to tech, we said, well, the next most important thing about this is who's he going to pick as a VP? Because if he picks Nikki Haley, well, we're screwed. If he picks Tim Scott, well, what's that about? And we said in that podcast in February, if he picks JD Vance, we'll know the game's on. And 2 days before he announces JD Vance, we have this insane thing happen in Pennsylvania that, more and more looks like some kind of conspiracy, like it was some kind of conspiracy to possibly take him out. I don't think it was a conspiracy to make him, by his people, to make him look more stronger, more patriotic, yada, yada. I think it was seriously, and I'm not going to go into the conspiracy because I don't care. We'll probably never know unless Trump gets elected and opens up his own investigation of it. And even then, still, we probably won't know. That's not important. What's important is the narrative. And 2 days later, he picks JD Vance. And now we have people like Mark Andreessen, who, in my opinion, and from people I've talked to privately, has taken over what Thiel used to do, where he would dole out where the money goes that tech is putting out there. He would tell people, all right, give this money to this person, this person, this person. And Andreessen is like, somebody posts on Twitter and says, I think what we're seeing is a circulation of the elites. Pareto talks about this, Wilfredo Pareto, that every once in a while the elites are just going to have an overproduction of them, too many of them, competency crisis, or you're going to have elites that just drop out and new elites step up. And this person tweeted out, I think we're seeing a circulation of elites, and it looks like Silicon Valley, some people in Silicon Valley are stepping up. And Mark Andreessen retweets that with a bullseye, and then he retweets his bullseye tweet with screenshots of the Managerial Revolution by James Burnham and the Machiavellians by James Burnham. And when I saw that, I was just like, okay, for better or for worse, I think that what their little tech, what Andreessen and Horowitz said in their in a podcast about 10 days ago, 14 days ago, that little tech is making their move. And I've taken a lot of crap on my side of the internet for backing guys who I don't agree with 100%, culturally, politically, and everything like that. And I'm like, well, I know the regime in charge hates me because, I'm pretty explicitly right wing. I go to church. I'm married. I'm straight. And best I can tell from these guys is they're pretty indifferent to my life. I will, Jeff Dice, who used to be the president of the Mises Institute, he called me in February of 2021, and he said, we were having a conversation, still in the middle of this COVID crap. Now, having the rollout of the vaccines at that time and everything. And he said, it's not about libertarian or Republican or Democrat anymore. It's people who want you dead and people who don't. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I look at the regime in charge and I'm like, they would take me out if they had the chance. I have great sympathy for the people who just decided to follow a cop's directions on January 6th. And I've said that I think that this regime is evil incarnate. And when I look and I examine what I know from Silicon Valley for the past, my whole life, since I started paying attention back in the 90s, these people just seem kind of indifferent to me. So when I go back to, what Jeff said, there's people who want you dead and there's people who don't. I'm gonna side and I'm gonna cheer for the people who I think don't want me dead.
This episode was presented by River. River's the best, most secure place to buy Bitcoin in the United States. Go to river.com/TFTC, set up an account today. You'll be able to DCA into Bitcoin without paying any fees. You'll be able to give people Bitcoin via River links. You'll be able to send and receive Bitcoin over the Lightning Network. And you'll be able to set limit orders. If you want to buy Bitcoin at a particular price, below or above where it is now, you can set orders to buy Bitcoin when it hits that price. Go to river.com/TFTC and set up your account today. This episode of TFTC was also brought to you by Bitkey. Bitkey is Bitcoin made easy to use and hard to lose. If you're a hardcore Bitcoiner out there with friends and family members who have not gotten their Bitcoin off exchanges because they're worried about the complexity of hardware wallets, seed phrase backups, this is why Bitkey exists. Bitkey is collaborative custody. You have a ergonomic hardware device with biometric confirmation. You have the Bitkey app with a key in it, and then block holds another key in the server. This doesn't come with any seed phrase backups that people have to secure. You have social backup. It's a beautiful solution. If you're worried about the people in your life that aren't as advanced as you in terms of Bitcoin hardware and being able to set that up and secure it, Bitkey is a great first step. So tell them to get a Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world. Use the code TFTC20 at checkout, and they'll get 20% off their first Bitkey.
Love the frame, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I feel very similar, especially in regards to how the current regime views me as a Bitcoiner who would like to see Bitcoin become the reserve currency of the world, as a white male happily married with two blonde hair, blue-eyed boys.
They hate your guts, man.
Yeah.
They hate your guts.
Yeah. But with that in mind, because I feel it feels like the stakes are higher than ever, and these next 90 days leading up to the election are going to be critical. And so with that, how high are the stakes for the little tech backers of Trump? What happens if you swing and you miss around this election? That's because post Butler, PA assassination attempt, obviously you have the iconic picture. You had the JD Vance pick not too long after that, and consensus was in the day after, 5 days after, he's going to win in a landslide. And it seems, I'm not sure if you're seeing this as well, but it seems like perception has shifted pretty dramatically over the last 2 weeks with the coup on Biden, just inserting Kamala as the nominee, and the spinning up of the propaganda machine to download all the malware in the NPCs to let them know that Kamala is the best thing since sliced bread. And post-COVID, I was maybe naively believe that people would have learned to sort of deflect the propaganda after how horrendous the propaganda campaigns post-COVID were. But over the last 2 weeks, I've been astonished to see how quickly people have picked up on the new propaganda being put out by the mainstream and just repeating it word for word, and wholly convinced that Kamala deserves to be the next president of the United States.
Well, I mean, I don't know who's saying that she deserves it. I see a lot of people who are saying that, that she can beat Trump. And I mean, I think, were you alive in 2016 when, even up to election day, even the betting, okay? Remember, if you remember 2016, the reason that so many people thought that Hillary was going to win is because the gamblers had her winning. And the gamblers had always had pick the winner. Whoever it was on election day, that was who won, whoever they picked. And then as the day goes by, you see the odds just shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting. I mean, the polls were all wrong. I mean, and I'm not even saying that the polls were wrong because people lied. I mean, I heard people go, "Oh, well, you know, if they call you and say, oh, sure, no, I don't want to vote for. I'm not going to vote for that mean Trump man. I'm going to vote for Hillary," and then they're going to vote for Trump. I don't even think. I just think they lied, and I think people forget that, and I think that people who are buying into this propaganda now. I mean, there's nothing you can do about the normie. Okay, the normie is going to. The normie is going to normie. It's the people who know better. You know, I see people that I know that I respect, people I've had on my show, who, you know, are spouting this, and you know that's when you wonder. You're like, what is everybody on the take? I mean, are you getting paid to say this? Because it's insane to think in a non-fortified election that Kamala is going to beat Trump. It just doesn't, that doesn't, how does that register to anyone? Yeah, sure, the lumpen proletariat, sure. Okay, yeah, they're idiots. They need to be ruled. That's why there can never be anarchy, there can never be libertarianism. Because people are fucking stupid and they need to be ruled. They need to be told what to do. And it seems that some people have fallen into that, even people I know and that I respect. Anyone who believes, absent, you know, voting irregularities, that Kamala Harris is going to beat Donald Trump, you're out of your mind. I mean, people are like, "Oh, he's scared to debate her. She was she was a litigator." So, you know how many lawyers I know? I'm not a lawyer. I didn't graduate college. Most of the lawyers I know, they're not smarter than I am. They're not going to take me down in a debate. This woman is a moron. I mean, she is a moron. She can get up there and spout, you know, whatever. I mean, whatever they put on cue cards or whatever in a debate, and I'm sure they'll try to do that for her. But, you know, it's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And Donald Trump is the biggest punch in the mouth to anybody who wants to debate him. Yeah, and I'm not saying that he's going to be as rude as he was with Hillary, but exposing just how double-digit IQ she is. Donald's perfect at that. And I mean, they'll play it up and try to do sympathy and everything. Oh, she just, you know, he just hates black women. I mean, an Indian woman. I mean, a Jamaican woman. Dad's not even Jamaican. He's like half Indian, half Scandinavian or something. They moved to Jamaica. Okay, well, does anybody think that this, I mean, absolute dumpster fire of a human is going to beat Donald Trump? I'm not saying Donald Trump is like some Aryan god, but I mean, to think that that would naturally happen, you would have to basically believe that some kind of mass hypnosis happened. And I don't think that, you know, COVID seemed to be a mass hypnosis, but it wasn't mass. It was 30% of the population. It was 30% of the population who was willing to act as, willing to act as like Stalin kind of apparatchiks for the regime. It's not, I mean, who even votes anymore? You think boomers are boomers excited to go out and vote for Kamala Harris? I mean, am I missing something here? I don't know. Maybe I am. I think that anybody who is bought into this like I said, absent, just stealing the election, has I, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they took the jab and something happened to them. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like I mentioned, I've been in the Northeast for the last few weeks and hearing people talk about it. Some boomers are gung ho about it, which makes me worry. But I agree. I think anybody who remembers 2016 or just simply looks at Kamala as a candidate versus Trump, it is hard to believe, which makes you question why the hell did they put her up there in the first place? Like, did they expect Trump to actually get his brains blown out in 4K HD? And this is a quick contingency plan that they had to roll with.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, but what were they going? I mean, were they? The question is if Trump is taken out in Butler, do they stay with Biden? What do they do? I mean, they basically get their Israel candidate anyway, because it'd probably be Nikki Haley or somebody who's just 100% pro-Zionist, who's going to come in there. And then that's another interesting thing, is I don't know that Kamala is like the perfect Zionist candidate for the left, which is really weird, because Joe, no matter what Biden said and what he did since October 7th, Joe Biden has always been a friend of Israel. And I would say a greater friend of Israel than Donald Trump. But I mean, I don't, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at this point. None of this makes any sense. You really have to understand. I think we have to understand that, to go back to like the PayPal mafia, is what we call these little tech guys. They see this as like an existential crisis. They believe that if they don't, and I know for a fact that from people I know these people who tell me things, they see AI as the most important thing right now. They do not want China to get ahead of us in AI. If China gets ahead of us in AI, we are screwed. And people who don't, I know if you're a Bitcoin guy, there's a lot of libertarians listening to this, and you automatically want to be, non-intervention and everything. You can be a non-interventionist. You could be someone who doesn't want to start a war and understand an existential crisis from another country, and especially a cyber one. Okay? If you can take down a country without firing a shot, I mean, that's the world we're going into. People need to realize that. And I think these guys realize that, which is why they talk about the military so much. I mean, they grew up in a world, these are Gen X people like myself. They grew up in a world where the Cold War, you didn't fire shots, you did proxy wars. You didn't get into these mass, United States on USSR. No, you had Grenada, or you had Vietnam, or you had Korea. You had little skirmishes here and there. And they understand that big world wars are bad for their business. I don't think these people like war. I think they want to see technology move forward. I think they want to create. I think they've proven to be creators and not destroyers. And they see that. They see AI. They see, if there isn't some kind of government push towards AI like there was towards nuclear, then China could get the upper hand and we're done. I mean, we'll be screwed. They also look at one big thing that I hear them talking about is taxing unrecognized, unrealized capital gains. They see that as basically destroying their companies within 5 years. and destroying the country within, probably 6. And this is the things that they talk about. This is the things that I've heard them talk about. These are the things that I've heard fear in their voice when they talk about. And I don't know. For everything, for everything that happened in 2020 with the election, and I don't know if you put this up on YouTube, so I don't really get specific because I know we can get taken down. For everything that happened, if these guys really see a threat, like it's their destruction, I don't know why they wouldn't be undergoing fortification efforts themselves right now. I would. I'll be perfectly honest about that. I would be fixing everything I possibly could. Because if this regime gets another 4 years, if this regime in charge gets another 4 years, I mean, pretty much our only hope at that point is either secession movements or radical decentralization, so like local politics and local areas basically becoming de facto secession movements. I don't see how we survive otherwise. We may even have to start looking at, like states and even localities coming up with their own currencies, things like that. I just don't see how we survive another 4 years of this with some of the things that they have on the table. I mean, they could all be threats. The unrealized capital gains could just be a threat. I mean, anyone who understands what that is knows it's completely insane. But I mean, the fact that they would have shut down the country, parts of the country for over a year, and then got private companies. It's a private company, bro. They can do whatever they want. Got private companies to do the vaccine mandates for them. I would have thought that was insane in 2019 if you would have told me.
Yeah. No, it seems pretty clear that, I mean, Kamala especially, but even Joe Biden, I think it's safe to say their policies are communist to an extent. I mean, I think James Lindsay has been going around saying this, Kamala's favorite line about being unburdened by the past is actually a communist incantation. And when you look at
what, I mean, I it's not, communist is a word that's used like fascist to make you, to distract you from the fact that these are ugly people who are jealous and they just want to destroy everything. That's what communism was. Okay. It's not, it wasn't some planned, it's like, well, if we do this, this happens. If we do this, this happens. No, we just kill everyone. We kill everyone that disagrees with us. I mean, I don't need James Lindsay, an effeminate, like, scumbag who says that he would rather this regime in charge stay in charge than right-wingers take over. He needs classical liberalism to take over. Classical liberalism, which brought us to where we are, which was the bridge which is the road that allows people to subvert, because you don't gatekeep. You're not allowed to say no to people. This whole idea that there's a marketplace of ideas. There's no marketplace of ideas. Whoever's in power tells you what the ideas are, and you believe them. Those are the ideas that get pushed through. There's manufactured consent. There's no marketplace. There's never a marketplace. It is always who has power, who controls the narrative. That's it. There's no communism. There's no fascism. All there is who has power and what are they going to do with it. Now we can look at people, we can look at someone and say, oh, well, they want to control business. That's classic fascism. Great. You put a label on it. What the hell? Okay, what did that get you? You can look at, what did the Bolsheviks do? Well, they, killed 10 to 11 million people within the first 4 years, because if you're going to institute the things you want, anyone who could possibly get in your way, it's easier just to get rid of them, right? This isn't about like labels. This is about will. Okay. What label would you even put on these tech guys, on little tech? Are they liberals? Are they libertarian? Sure, they have some libertarian, they have some liberal, they have conservative, they have far right. There's some fascist tendencies in there. Some of them, the ones on the left who are actually supporting Kamala have some communist tendencies, some things that would. But how do you label these people? What do you got to come up with something new now? It's not the label. It's what they do. It's what their intent is. It's are they going to allow people to live historically? Are they going to allow people to care more about family, their own families, than they do other people's families? Are they going to try to deracinate people by turning the country into what it already is, an open-air strip mall? A mall where the only thing that matters is if the line goes up. And what are we seeing today? The line's going down and everybody's in a panic, because that's not supposed to happen. Because if the line's not going up, we don't have freedom. Why? Because we're economic units. We're little annuities going through life that this government can feed off of. They don't care about your family. They don't care about your ancestral homeland. They don't care about your family's cemetery. They'd kick it over if they got a chance. That's the problem with America. That's the problem with Americans, is they eschew family and they bought into money. And we have an economic zone, and we have certain people who are like, I have the answer to this. We just need to have sound money. Really? If you have sound money with immorality, what do you have?
An immoral society.
What do you have? You just have this is an open air strip mall. That's all this country is now.
Yeah, it's been described by some Bitcoiners as a high velocity trash economy. That's all that matters. It's quarterly financials number go up in the stock market, GDP growth. And even then that's
I worked for a multinational corporation before I started doing this. It was they were not thinking 10 years down the line. They were not thinking 20, even though it was an over 100-year-old company. They weren't thinking, and it was a private company. It wasn't even public. It's one of the oldest companies in Europe I worked for. They didn't think, at least in the North American headquarters that I worked in, they weren't thinking 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. They were thinking about what their bonus was going to be. And not even this quarter, but this month. That's all they thought about. And they didn't care if anything that they were implementing wasn't sustainable for the next 10 years to 20 years. And that's because that's what we've been sold. We've been sold line go up. If that graph is not going up, it's a sin. It's a sin against the economy, which is God. And, you're going to have to make your penance. You may have to become a libertarian or something like that and pledge yourself to the free market, which will never exist. We can have all the sound money we want. Okay. What are two countries that people point to in this world where people are like, they do pretty, Switzerland and Singapore. Okay. Switzerland. Is it multi-ethnic? Is it multiracial? Is it kind of an ethno state? Kind of. Yeah. Singapore actually is multi-ethnic and multiracial. You have all sorts of Asians there, and Asians and different Asian groups hate each other. Well, how do they get by then? They get by because they value authority, and they will cane you for spitting gum on the ground. And yeah, they take a heavy hand. So when you think of these two countries where, things seem to work really well there, and basically, I mean, all Singapore or Switzerland are gigantic banks. That's all they are. They're just banks. Well, how do they make it work? 1, ethno-state. 2, authoritarianism. But, here what do we have? We don't have an ethno-state. We have multi-ethnic, multiculturalism. Diversity is our strength, which is why I'm sure anyone watching this wants to go walking in Chicago on Saturday night at 11 o'clock, downtown. How do we solve this? Sound money? Sound money is going to clean up Chicago. Sound money is going to clean up Camden, New Jersey. Sound money is going to clean up Albuquerque, South Central LA. Is that what's going to do it? I don't know. I think that if you believe that, I would like to, maybe we'll go driving through Camden, New Jersey on a Saturday night, and we'll preach Bitcoin to them and see how they react.
Yeah. Now that's been the most unnerving thing of post-COVID world is the complete collapse in the rule of law, the manufactured collapse of the rule of law, whether it be the ACAB movement, the DAs that refuse to enforce the laws on the books, the limits to how much you can steal without getting in trouble. It's common. That's the scariest and most unnerving part about it. Is like common sense, 10 commandments: don't steal, don't harm your neighbor. And they, at a certain point, were encoded into law in terms of if you broke that law, you would be punished for it. But it has been completely blown out in the last 4 years, particularly. And not that it was perfect before, but it's certainly accelerated in the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I think that's what's radicalized a lot of these little tech guys, because they're from, they're in Silicon Valley, San Francisco. They've watched what San Francisco has become. Now, I know they wouldn't want to hear this. Maybe David Sachs wouldn't want to hear this, but their culture, the culture of Silicon Valley, maybe that feeds into it, because it's like, well, there's a lot of leftism there and there's a lot of libertarianism there. As live and let live, it's like, I mean, wait. I just don't understand how people can look around and see, like, okay, so San Francisco is a place that has some of the wealthiest people on the planet. Would you say that or San Francisco and the surrounding area has some of the wealthiest people on the planet? Would you agree?
Agreed.
Okay. How's that working out?
Yeah.
How's that working out? It doesn't seem like you can have law and order unless you take things into your own hands. Unless you actually, your friends get power. You know, I've always said, yeah, I mean, I hate the state too, because my friends don't run it. I'm perfectly fine with the state if my friends are in charge. Or, you know, and at this point, it's like, at least people who don't hate me are in charge. But the state is a given. It's not going anywhere. I used to be an anarcho-capitalist. This documentary on Amazon right now on anarcho-capitalism that I helped produce and write. After 2020, and after seeing the reaction, and after watching libertarians not realize that the government, the state, was using private companies to mandate the vaccine, I was like, screw you guys. I would rather live in 1930s Germany. It's just, this is ridiculous. You people are ridiculous. You worship business and capitalism, which is, I don't even know what that means anymore. You worship economics so much, and it's such a, you're so dogmatic about it that you're willing to watch private companies become an arm of the state, and you can't even recognize it because you're so ideological. You're in this box. And not only that, but this ideology has become your identity. And because you may not be a Christian or a husband or a father, or, you know, because you don't have those things, you need something, or you're so terminally online that that's where all your friends are, and you don't want to get kicked out of the group chat if you question, hey, maybe this isn't a good thing, maybe private companies are wrong here. And that's when I was like, I mean, I just can't be a part of this anymore. I can't promote this anymore. And I still have there are some things about me that I still think that libertarianism is good for helping you to examine certain things and be able to figure out how it went wrong. But all of their solutions are theoretical unless you're willing to get power and put them into play. And then so many libertarians will say, well, I mean, political power is immoral. I'm like, then you just have a hobby. Then this is all a hobby to you. It's just you arguing on the internet. It's you saying, I just caught you in a performative contradiction because you're arguing with me, and, you know, I'm a Hoppian and everything. That's great. That's fantastic. Now, please face the wall. I mean, I don't get it. You know, you've said that you're hoping that Bitcoin becomes a reserve currency for the world. That means that governments exist and states exist. And that means monopolies on violence exist. That is a realistic way of looking at the world. But not being able to criticize a company that's doing the bidding of the state because of some religious belief that you have that you can't even substantiate in reality, I mean, that's real faith. Yeah, I can make the argument that God exists from nature, from order, from things, from this, from that, and everything. You can't even show me an example of where what you're saying exists has ever existed in reality. Well, medieval Iceland and medieval Ireland. Sure, whatever. Yeah, I would love to see the person who brings that up. I would love to see them living in clan wars in medieval Ireland, being involved in clannish wars in medieval Ireland. That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to see that. Love to see. They don't have your SSRIs there, people. They're not going to have your SSRIs. So maybe stop talking about things that you wouldn't even be able to last a day in.
Yeah. No, I think this has become clear within or to a lot of individuals who would have considered themselves libertarians in the past, but the whole libertarianism meme has really picked up steam. And I think what you just said, succinctly put, is like, you may not care about political power, but political power cares about you. And this is, whether you like it or not, this is the way the world is.
As Aaron McIntyre said, he said, the people who want to rule will always rule over the people who just want to be left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I just want to be left alone. Great. There are people in the world who are not going to leave you alone. What do you do? Now what? That's my whole thing. That was, people got sick of me saying that libertarians just attack me over and over again all through 2021, because I'd be like, they'd make an argument to me. I'd be like, okay, well, that exists now and it's not going away. Now what? Now what? What are you going to do? You going to sit there and argue theory? Great, I can do that too. I like theory. I mean, sure. I mean, it's great. But in reality, there are people who are violent and they want to impose their will on you. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. One of the reasons I live in the middle of nowhere is I'm done. I grew up in the city. I've lived in cities my whole life. I'm done with it. I just wanted to get out, and I want to die. I want to die in a peaceful place where you know your neighbors' names and people say hi to each other in the grocery store. Strangers say hi in the grocery stores. And growing up in New York City, living in Fort Lauderdale, living in Atlanta, that didn't happen. It just didn't happen. Even living in Auburn, I lived in Auburn for almost 2 years. That was too big, But what I guess these people think that, well, the way I hear some people who call themselves libertarians and anarcho-capitalists, like, well, well, if there's no state, then I can have all these guns and everything. And when, the private army of the local, I mean, like, literally, they want the warlord meme, the whole warlord meme, that they're just asking for it. Because that's what would happen. They just don't understand it. So it's like, okay, so I put together an army of 1,000 people and I show up and you're on your roof with a 308. Okay, how many you're going to take some of my guys out, but eventually we're just going to kill you and take your stuff. Well, and I don't know why people don't realize that that's exactly what would happen. Maybe because that's something they wouldn't do. Well, I wouldn't do that. Well, there are people that would do that. I wouldn't do it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people that would do that. Just because you don't know people that would do that. And believe me, you know people who would do that. You just aren't willing to accept it because you're so steeped in your ideology that you can't come out of this box. I exist in this box, and as soon as I step outside that box a little bit, I know somebody who told me they will not read books by anyone who they consider to be a statist. Okay, so Burnham's gone, Aristotle's gone, Plato's gone, the Bible's gone. What? That just shows how weak you are. It just shows that you understand how fragile your belief system is, that you can't allow it to be challenged. I am horribly, I consider Zionism to be the biggest enemy in this world. Do you know how many books I've read by Zionists? Do you know why I consider them to be the greatest threat to this world and the greatest threat to the United States? Because I read them. I actually read what they write. Read it on my podcast. I let people decide for themselves. I've read Lenin's State and Revolution on my podcast. I've read Ted Kaczynski's manifesto on my podcast. I've read books that I don't agree with on my podcast. Why? The more I know, the better I can see the world more clearly. People who are just stuck in this box, who are like, well, this is all I'm going to allow myself to read, because I don't know if I read, if I read Imperium by Francis Parker Yockey, I may start to think like a fascist. Okay, so, and that means something in there resonates with you. Why would you want to avoid something that resonates with you? I mean, I think Lenin was one of the most despicable people that ever lived. There's stuff in his writings that I agree with. I agree with. Karl Marx was probably right on 90% of the things. Even Hans Hermann Hoppe says that. He was probably right on 90% of what he wrote. Okay, why wouldn't I read people that I don't agree with? I might change my mind about something. There's the problem. There's that, going back to that identity thing again. You may have to change your identity, and you may have to step outside, and you may have to say goodbye to some of your friends because your friends are ideological idiots. Once you realize they're ideological idiots, maybe you don't want to hang around with them anymore. When I one of the things that I'm most proud of is when I stopped being a libertarian and I started talking about things that were verboten to libertarianism, is how many people took the ride with me. Is how many people who now contact me on pretty much a daily basis and say, thank you from getting me out of that thinking. It's a dead end. There is nothing. There are things I can find there personally that are enriching to me, but politically, if I care about politics, concentrating on libertarianism is probably the most impotent thing you could do. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think at one point I would have considered myself libertarian, at one point anarcho-capitalist too. Not sure, sort of wading in the waters. I think what I do know, I'm more left side of the bell curve. Like, I do think the erosion of the nuclear family has been horrific for society overall. I think the high velocity trash economy is not good for society overall. I think there are things we need to do to fix the incentives to basically get people to act better to each other and to make sure that we can continue to flourish as a society. I think energy is at the core of it. And you just look at, again, what you said earlier, these people hate you. They want you dead. And to me, it's obvious just via their policy. You can look at monetary policy. You can look at energy policy. You could look at immigration policy. And if you're just looking at the scoreboard over the last 4 years, particularly, everything's gone in a terrible direction. And I was also in the camp. And now, after talking with Tom and hearing your conversation with him and talking to many others in the lead up to this election, and the PayPal mafia, Palantir, Tesla being a subsidy whore, like that always rubbed me the wrong way. But really internalizing the idea that you may not care about political power, but political power cares about you. It's like, all right, who do you want leading the country over the next 4 years? Kamala and the deep state puppeteers who have been behind Biden for the last 4 years, or people that have brought us incredible technology. And for me personally, professionally in the Bitcoin space, that they would be a massive net benefit compared to the incumbent administration for me personally. So it's
Well,
a no-brainer.
Elon, I've never met Elon Musk, probably would never will, probably never talk to him, but he has helped to bring great joy to my life in that I live someplace that I'm happy, happier than I've ever been in my whole life. And I couldn't talk to you right now. I wouldn't be able to talk to you right now if it weren't for Elon Musk. There is no internet out here, but Starlink is here. So, I mean, I'm eternally grateful that I can live here. I can do my business here, and I can talk to people all over the world because Elon Musk, was a welfare whore, and created this internet that basically works from anywhere. I mean, it just basically works from anywhere. And I don't own a Tesla product or anything like that. But there are other welfare whores out there who have created stuff that helps our lives. And now there is a chance. It's an outside chance. I don't think nothing's guaranteed. And when you go after I believe this government, this regime in charge, not the government itself, but the regime in charge is dying. But, a wounded animal is very dangerous. I think there's a chance that some real damage could be done to it. And if through their welfare whoring all these years, they're able to use that to actually damage this regime in charge. And I don't want them to make my life better. I just want them to clear a path so that I don't have obstacles in my way, where I can say things that aren't going to get me, that aren't immediately going to get me targeted or something like that, canceled, things like that. Then, thank you. If they are somehow manage to be able to do that, dismantle this administrative state a little bit, really do some damage. Thank you for welfare whoring. Thank you for welfare whoring all these years, and doing what needed to be done, and it coming to this, and you actually using your power for good, because we know the people in charge right now are not using their power for good. Anyone who's looked at what's happened in Ukraine since 2014, even since 1991. I mean, that's probably the biggest tragedy on the planet right now. And, it's all people in this regime who orchestrated that, made it happen.
I mean, like you said earlier, they're like physically ugly as well. You think of like Victoria Nuland, Hillary Clinton, the Rolodex of people that really pushed a lot of this foreign policy and economic policy forward, and pushing the woke mind virus via the political apparatus or the private sector with things like DEI. Like, these people are physically and figuratively ugly inside and out, and that's something I worry about too. You mentioned like they're a wounded animal right now, and a wounded animal lashes out. And you look at what happened over the last few days with the markets lines going down, but some lines weren't going down, particularly the defense companies like Lockheed.
Always.
That's what I worry about between now and the election, is do they try to push us to World War III? And obviously you have things popping off between Iran and Israel right now, and it seems like the war drums are beginning to beat as we get closer to the election. And is that the last gasp of ugliness that we get from this regime, or are they successful in corralling people into backing a wartime regime to make sure that we get some peace, or make sure that we get some peace?
I've been saying for a while that I don't think that we're going to have war with Iran. I think it's the proxy wars are enough. You know,
Mhm.
the fight against the Houthis, the fight against Hezbollah, the hatred for Bashar al-Assad, and these are just basically proxy wars with Iran. And one of the reasons is I've studied Iran, and I've studied like their topography. Like going to war with Iran, the only way they'd be able to do it is with nukes. They're not going to be able to do it with ground forces. They're not going to be able to do it with aircraft because they have this range of mountains with Russian anti-aircraft technology all throughout it. I mean, they just have to go for nukes. We don't even there's not even a place to stage properly. We'd have to reinvade Iraq. Turkey won't allow us to stage. The only other possible Afghanistan is not going to allow us to stage. The only other possible place is Saudi. Saudi, I mean, the sorties would you'd be telegraphing yourself where you're coming from. There's no way to go to war with Iran outside of nukes. And I think nukes could be intercepted because of just where, if you look at where Tehran is on a map and you look at the surrounding areas, you just realize how perfectly situated they are. And I mean, this isn't me just saying this because it's my opinion. You know, I look back at the assassination of Soleimani by Trump and how after that, like a couple of days after they did that, Iran bombed a Iraqi base, a U.S. base in Iraq, and they just dropped some bombs on it. And Trump even went so far as to say, "Look, they had to save face. They did that." And it was the same thing when Israel, I think they bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus earlier this year, and they killed a couple of generals. And then Iran sent the drones to at Israel, which landed in the desert and landed, nowhere. Or I guess everyone now is waiting for an Iran retaliation over what happened with the head of Hamas. I can't remember his name. I would assume it's going to be the same thing. It'll just be some kind of kayfabe. And it really makes me wonder what exactly this is all about. I mean, when you consider that Israel was selling Iran weapons in the 1980s, and then, it became, Iran's 5 weeks away from having a nuke and everything. I just don't see it. I mean, what I see is I just see continued like war with Hezbollah, and I don't even know if Israel can win a war with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is formidable. So, and then they're basically fighting a forefront war right now. I don't know that. The way I look at it is, if they were to try to really, if the United States were to get involved while Biden is still president, and let's put that in quotes, it would be against his will. He wouldn't want that. Harris would definitely not want that. Trump doesn't want that. People can say everything they want about Trump. The most Zionist president ever, Jerusalem. So, I mean, Trump is just another one of those guys who's just like, war is bad for business. It's bad. Let's just make weapons. I mean, that's the one place where I'm white-pilled. I don't see war with Iran. I worry way more about what's happening with Russia, because there's a war happening on their border, and Ukraine is launching missiles into Russia, and they're killing Russians. And it seems like this White House or this regime is starting to distance himself from them. And I think one of the reasons why that would possibly happen, I think you could still see some cash infusions, but I think all it will be is just basically money laundering, just getting money to people. None of that money it makes it to actually Ukraine. It just goes to our military industrial complex, and then they send things over there. And I'm sure money gets diverted in other places. Yeah, I'm worried about Russia, and I'm very happy, glad that Vladimir Putin is the president of Russia and Sergei Lavrov is his foreign minister, because they have way more patience than I would. I would hate. Ukraine would not exist right now if I was president of Russia. It wouldn't exist. And, I'm just glad that there's somebody like Vladimir Putin there, because he is showing amazing restraint, considering everything that they've done to try and drag him into seemingly like World War III.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I heard or saw a headline last week that Zelensky's open to peace talks. Seems like he's even exacerbated. He's seeing that the money's probably not coming to support.
He doesn't want to end up like it. He doesn't want to end up like Gaddafi. Yeah. And I'm hoping he does. But
yeah. I mean, you mentioned one of the things you're white-pilled about, but if little tech Trump were to get back into office and were to go forth and try to execute on their plan to fix what's broken, particularly in this country, like, do you have confidence in them being able to do that? And if so, like, what do you think this means for America headed towards the 2030s? Like, do you think we could experience a renaissance and actually get away from this woke mind virus and get back to work and begin fixing the country and the systemic issues that exist within it?
I don't think the woke... well, these people really do hate DEI, because DEI is, just... one thing, when you study these little tech guys, you understand that they're all about competence. They want competent people.
That was my favorite line from I actually wrote it down. I think you said in the middle of that episode, these people cherish confidence or competency, excuse me. And,
yeah. Look at the business they're in. They need competent people. So I'm pretty sure I know they hate DEI because of that, because they're forced to hire people who are incompetent. The woke mind virus, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that they can... like I said, this regime has been in place for 100 years now. A little less than 100 years. It's dying. I mean, anybody who says it's not is not really paying attention. But there's a chance it could take another 100 years to die. Really, what I think we're kicking the can down the road. If they could dismantle like the administrative state, that would be something else. I mean, I'm talking about mass firings. I'm talking about people are like, oh, well, if they fire 100,000 people, think about what that's going to do to the economy. I don't care. Okay. Just like Jerome Powell keeping interest rates high is causing all sorts of, problems with pricing and problem with interest rates on, I don't care. Okay. That's the whole line go up thing. If the line's not going up, it's a sin. No, it's going to... If you're going to fix stuff, it's going to hurt. And it's going to hurt for a while. I don't think they can fix everything. I think they can fix some important things. But, it's going to be... I really think it's very important that, regular people support change, like even in their minds, think about it all the time. I believe in God. I believe in metaphysics. And I believe that change can be made because people want change to be made. And I believe if enough people want change to be made, then that change will be made. And I believe we can keep it. And I believe we can actually change and change for periods of time. I think we are going towards decentralization. I think we will see secession movements no matter what happens. I don't know if it's in my lifetime, but I think that's the direction we're going. And hopefully what they can do is, I said the best thing that we can hope for these guys if they get in power and they actually have the will to try and do what they want to do is to just knock some walls over that we can cross and go to the other side and start building what comes next. And, Nick Land, the philosopher Nick Land said, the only way out of this is through it. And what's on the other side is going to be something new. Sure, it's going to have echoes. Sure, it's going to have an older morality to it. But when you look at like what a lot of these tech guys are technocrats, I would say many of them are transhumanists. I think the belief that transhumanists want everybody else to be transhumanist, I think that's something people read into it. There are people who want to live forever, and that doesn't necessarily mean they want everyone to live forever. And that doesn't necessarily mean they need to see your demise early, like they're going to do something to you, something bad to you, or because they want to live forever, somehow that's going to affect you. Maybe. But I'm just not willing to live in a world anymore and live inside my head of thinking that everything bad that could happen is going to happen. If we don't have hope that the future will be better for our families, offspring, everything, why even do this? Why even talk about it? Why mine Bitcoin? Why read old books on my show? Why, tell people to build social capital and come together, and that there's strength in numbers, and that you want to be around. It's good to be around people that think like you and look like you and talk like you and share your beliefs. That multiculturalism is an abject failure, and to reject it. I mean, there's no way I would be doing this if I thought that we couldn't see change, positive change in my lifetime. I mean, just look at some of the things that we've seen. I don't know how spicy I can get on the show, but October 7th, if you would have told me before October 7th that on Twitter, X, the biggest platform in the world, that people would openly be discussing the historical Jewish question that was posed by Karl Marx, and that people weren't going to get kicked off of X for it, I'd have told you were out of your mind. Now, mind you, in the 1920s, these things were discussed in newspapers and debated, in columns and debated openly. It got to the point where it's like, well, we can't talk about these things anymore. It's mean. And now people are talking about multiculturalism. Now you have people rising up in Great Britain and going, look, our town, 1 in 3 women in our town has been raped in the last 10 years by these migrants that were forced upon us. None of us got out here. None of us went out into the street and lobbied. Nobody went to a politician and lobbied and said, you know what? We need more people from Ghana here. We need more people from Eritrea here. We need more people from the Middle East. No one did that. It was forced upon them. And now people are fighting back. And you have people at the RNC, for as much of a sideshow as that was in many ways, holding up signs saying mass deportations now. And what's funny is the first person I saw who was holding up that sign to me looked Mexican. And I just made the joke to my wife, and I'm like, yeah, we are in unprecedented times now. And so if you would have told me that all these things, that those things would happen, things that just 4 years ago would have got you debanked and deplatformed, and I mean, stuff you just couldn't say in public, that now it would be an open discussion. And yeah, of course, people on regime oriented are still disgusted by it. And they call you a fascist and they call you a racist. And then when you say, call me whatever you want, I don't care, they have no idea what to do because no one's apologizing to them anymore. There's your white pill. If you understand that culture is everything, and you see that people are fighting to take back their culture and openly talking about it, and Americans are fine with not ending immigration, but reversing immigration and saying these people have to go and saying they need to be rounded up. Why would anybody think that positive change can't be made? Even if you don't think that those things are positives, the fact that they're even being discussed openly lets you know that we're in a different time where something has shifted. And I can't point directly to it. Man, it seems like Elon Musk buying Twitter really was a huge shift in the spirit of the age of where things are going. I know a lot of people are still black-pilled out there, and they hate Elon for this and that, and he's not the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler and everything like that, and yada yada. We need Hitler to come back to clean everything up. He was right the first time. Look at Weimar in the 1920s. I mean, at this point, we just take what little victories we can. And it seems like there have been more and more victories. And I know there's, Jared Taylor is not on Twitter, and there's certain people who still aren't on Twitter. Okay, but I am. And a lot of people are who say challenging things and say things that upset the apple cart, and that more and more people are taking seriously. Hopefully these tech guys recognize that and are, from things that I've heard, they hear us. JD Vance follows on Twitter a bunch of my mutuals. And a lot of my mutuals on Twitter are the kind of people who have these discussions openly on Twitter. The verboten stuff I was just talking about. So if potentially have a guy who's going to be the second most powerful person in the world who knows the things we talk about and follows people to read them and take them in and get the pulse of people. And it could be for nefarious reasons. And a lot of people will think that because They're just completely lost and don't think anything will ever change. But I think things can change. I think things are changing. And letting perfect be the enemy of the good is something I left behind in libertarianism. And I don't want anything to do with, now that I've left libertarianism, I don't want anything to do with it in any other ism that I may show deference to.
Got the volunteer fire department alarm going off behind us, so please excuse me. But
Oh, no, that's fine. I have a volunteer. I literally live next to a volunteer fire department.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's chaotic right now. Obviously, you have social unrest rising globally. Look what's going on in the UK. What's going on in France, here in the US to a certain extent. You look what's going on financially, despite the fact that all the numbers on the lines have been going up for years. It's very apparent to people on the ground that not all is well. Their money doesn't buy as much as it did in years past. And you have the DEI crisis getting to the point where it's creating this competency crisis where people are throwing their hands up and saying this is bullshit. Like, it's time to fix this. You look at the crime. That's where I think we're at. It's like people are like, I've had enough. Maybe not everybody. You're not going to save everybody, but there's enough momentum on the backs of people that are like, fuck it, it's time to fix this. Like, this has gone too far. And I'm extremely optimistic in my world, in Bitcoin, fixing our small part of the world, fixing the money to some extent, as you mentioned earlier. Not a panacea for all these problems that we're talking about, but certainly an important part, I would argue, is separating money from central banks and governments and letting people choose the money that they want to. And as a side effect of that, creating these positive externalities and things like energy systems. And it's exciting to be white pill too and to have hope, because it's much more energy sucking to be a doomer and to be black pilled, because you're always talking about what's wrong, how things are fucked up. And I don't know, just personally being in the space that I am, working with a bunch of founders building companies and talking with people like you and many different walks of life that really want to solve these problems and are focusing on solutions, is just a much better way to go about life.
Yeah. I mean, if you, and I really think it comes down to, just to, close this out and everything, I think it comes down to ideology. If you think that everything has to be this perfect way, this, I have this checklist, and if things don't meet this checklist, everything is crap. Everything will always be crap. I mean, you're never, ever, ever going to get the perfect. Ever. I mean, you can't go back in history and find the perfect. It's not anywhere. There's nowhere where it's perfect. There was always, it's like, people always ask me where I would go. I'd love to be like Ferdinand and Isabella Spain, and Catholic Spain. I would love to live in Catholic Spain, especially at that time. But I mean, was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect at all. There was a lot of problems there. They were figuring things out. I mean, they were actually, figuring out how to monetarily run an empire. And they had some really good ideas. We're doing a series with a buddy of mine on Spain's golden age right now. When you start looking at some of their monetary, they separated everything. It's like foreign affairs, domestic affairs. They had all that separated. They had different treasuries for it and everything. But still, everything wasn't perfect. Everything came crashing down. Spain had probably the greatest empire in the history of mankind. And it came crashing down, as it always will. We're people, man. We're imperfect. We're going to screw stuff up. You know, we can try to create systems, and you know, those systems there's always going to be something in a system that's gonna go wrong. Usually, it's going to be human. It's going to be human. No humans are perfect, and no humans are always going to have another person's best interests at heart. And you know, they'll even do things to sabotage themselves without even knowing it. So we do the best we can do. We work towards. We don't rely on somebody else coming to save us.
Mm-hmm.
That's one straw man that I get whenever I talk about the PayPal mafia. Oh, you're just waiting for them to come and save you. Oh, fuck yourself. No, I've never said that. I've always said you need to be building. You need to be building personally. You need to be working. You need to be building social capital with people of like mind. You need to be making alliances locally, things like that. Always said that. Never said that these guys are going to come in. The only thing I've ever said about this PayPal mafia change is that they may be able to knock down some walls to give us some opportunities that we wouldn't have had without them. That's not saving. That's just making our lives a little bit easier. I'd like my life to be a little bit easier. I mean, I'd like to know China isn't going to control AI and basically destroy our grid. Figure out how to just take everything down. You know, I mean, what's the one thing that, you know, and people can talk about paper wallets all they want. But what's the one thing that could kill Bitcoin? Just take down the internet. You don't think China would do that? You don't think those psychopaths? I mean, these are not normal people, man. Their ideology is like out of another planet. You know, so you know, I'm hoping these guys can at least get AI squared away for the future, and you know, do some damage to the managerial state. And I think that'll improve our lives a lot, as long as you're not looking for, you know, people to take care of you and you know, do everything for you.
Yeah, and meant to mention it earlier, but wrap it up on this. I think Trump's economic plan that was leaked. I don't know if it was leaked, but Thomas Massey came out and described it after a meeting with Trump that Republicans had on the Hill. And if he really does come in and try to eliminate the income tax, raise tariffs, like that dictates that unless you want national debt to run away faster than it already is, you need to cut government jobs pretty significantly. And so that's like a light nod towards that.
This does not work without government job cuts at all. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we could go back to the economy, the trade policy we had in the 19th century, where, you know, trade was supposed to be free within the country, and then tariffs, and you know, there was no real income tax. Friedrich List, the great German economist Friedrich List, who when I studied Austrian economics, I would have just thought was a statist and he was crazy. But man, it was very simple. What he taught was very simple. It's like, you can run a country off of tariffs. You can fund a government with tariffs, but you have to have manufacturing at home. You have to have manufacturing at home. We have these, you know, I know I'll sound like Alex Jones here for a second, but these globalists have outsourced manufacturing. And, you know, Steve Bannon talks about how when he was in Harvard Business School in the 1980s, that's what they were teaching. They were teaching, no, if you send manufacturing to China, it'll be much cheaper. Even if you had to send parts over there, have them be manufactured there and then ship them back here, the labor you're going to save over there over American labor is going to be cheaper. And that's what Harvard Business School was teaching in the 1980s. And, you know, he bought into it until, you know, later on, and he figured out what it was. And, you know, we need manufacturing back in the United States. I mean, people say, well, we exported our pollution, our manufacturing pollution. We can do things a lot cleaner now. We can do things a lot cleaner now. And that's no reason to have our, pharmaceuticals, our chips, the things that we need to run, that people need to stay healthy in a completely unhealthy world, and to, run our machines, run our cars, run everything. You're putting it in the hands of somebody else. It's one of the most diabolical things about, there's only like 6 countries that you can get military aircraft from. So if an African country wants to build up their air force, they have to buy from one of 6 countries. And what does that do? Okay, now you have to get the parts from them. Now a lot of service is going to come from them. You're basically tied to them now. They can screw with you. They can this government can now do anything they basically want to you, because you're tied to their economy is tied to you and to your military, which you may, if you're a warring nation, that's important. That's exactly what we have with China, with other countries who are hostile to the way we do things. Why would we keep that up? We need to build factories like now. We need to manufacture things here now. I also think that's something that Elon has done. I think that those facilities of Elon, you live in Austin, you've seen the Tesla facility. Do you think he's using all of that? Or do you think that possibly he could be setting it up so that he could build chips there? He could build things that are being built overseas there. He just has to have the regulations removed so that he could do it. Now, that's me theorizing, but I don't think it's a bad theory, especially when you consider that, he understands all those things about being tied to foreign manufacturing. So, yeah.
Yeah. White pills. I'm hopeful. I think the vibe shift, the shift in energy is definitely palpable. It's happening, and I think the momentum's only going to increase from here. So with that, I really appreciate your time this afternoon, Peter. It's a fascinating conversation, and hopefully we can do it again. I think you and Tom riffing together really helped crystallize some of these ideas and the framing around how you should approach what's going on right now, particularly with the PayPal mafia coming in, and the concept of elite theory and where we stand today. So thank you for that. And
I appreciate it.
Hopefully we can do this again at some point.
Sure. Reach out anytime. Hopefully my power won't be out all day up until like 25 minutes before we're supposed to record.
That's what I felt bad. I didn't want to, and I'm happy it came back on, but I'm sure it's been a stressful day for you. So,
we would never go out to eat lunch on a Monday, but it's like, let's go someplace that has air conditioning. We're in the middle of Alabama. You have no air conditioning, in August in Alabama. It's like, I don't want to sit in my car running the AC all day either.
Yeah, it's part of the reason we escape Austin and come up to Jersey in the summer. It's too fucking hot.
Yeah.
The ocean's not too bad.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great night. That's all we got today. Freaks, peace, and love.